Henry David Thoreau went out into the woods for 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days. And he writes in Walden that he went out into the woods so that he could live deliberately and so that he could face life head on and learn what it had to teach. And then he has this extraordinarily haunting line. He says, because I didn't want to come to the end of my life and find that I had never lived. Welcome back to the Stand Firm Project. I'm Monsignor James Shea, the president of the University of Mary in Bismarck, North Dakota. I'm happy to be with you today. The motto of the University of Mary is Lumen Vitae, the light of life. That comes from the prologue of the Rule of St. Benedict, which is more than 1,500 years old. And the passage in full says, run while you have the light of life before the darkness of death overtakes you. St. Benedict here is quoting from the 12th chapter of John's Gospel, where Jesus says that we're meant to walk, to go forward while we have the light of life. This insight of St. Benedict that we have to do it, we have to run, we have to move forward while we have the light of life before the darkness of death overtakes us, is a deeply Christian and deeply Catholic instinct and insight. Why? Because for a monk, for those who live under the rule of St. Benedict, all of life is about preparing for death. And that's the case for us too. Recently, David Brooks did a series of studies in which he asked whether we should spend our lives looking for resume virtues or eulogy virtues. In other words, are we looking to develop the habits of mind and body and the skills necessary for our resumes that we can brag about and be proud of? Or are we looking to develop those sets of habits of mind and soul and virtues that people will talk about after we've died? What kind of legacy will we leave behind? And how will people speak of us when we've gone to God? Well, this is a question which has haunted human life for a long time. I think of 170 years ago this year, in 1854, the American abolitionist and transcendentalist philosopher Henry David Thoreau published his work Walden. Most of us had to read it in junior high or in high school. Henry David Thoreau went out into the woods for 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days. And he writes in Walden that he went out into the woods so that he could live deliberately and so that he could face life head on and learn what it had to teach. And then he has this extraordinarily haunting line. He says, because I didn't want to come to the end of my life and find that I had never lived. And then he says, and this I think is more true today, 170 years later than it was in 1854, he said, most men live lives of quiet desperation. Most men live lives of quiet desperation, going from one thing to the next, not knowing how it all holds together, wanting to survive, not knowing how to thrive, hemmed in by the anxieties and daily obligations of life, and really with all of the joy then and the energy and the vitality that we're meant to live with sucked out of them. Life can be very hard and challenging, especially if we don't know what we're living for. And so Thoreau went out into the woods so that when he came to the end of his life, he wouldn't have to face the bitter fact that he had never lived. So St. Benedict says, run while you have the light of life before the darkness of death overtakes you. Run while you have the light of life. That light isn't something that we generate within ourselves, especially those of us who are just disciples of Jesus, those of us who are followers of Christ. We know that that light, the light which not only burns within us, but gives us the wisdom of faith so that we know what's really true beyond even what our eyes can see and what our senses can perceive. That light is the light of faith, which opens out for us a whole another dimension of reality. Without that gift of faith, without the light of life, we live in darkness, even though our eyes can see. And no earthly light then is great enough for us to be able to see. If you go to Rome, we have a campus of the university in Rome, and our students get to go to the Vatican museums. Everybody goes there, to see the Sistine Chapel, which is very beautiful, Michelangelo. At the same time the Sistine Chapel was being painted, there was a much younger artist, Raphael, who was painting the rooms of Julius II just next door. And if you go there, there's an extraordinary scene of St. Peter in the Acts of the Apostles being let out of prison. And there's an angel letting him out. And Raphael's great genius is that he has there all kinds of different light. There's the light of the torch. There's the light of the moon that's shining. Then there's a light that comes from the angel himself, a kind of heavenly light which breaks over the whole scene. And you see there the genius of Raphael in being able to capture in one piece of artwork this breathtaking panoply or variance or variety of light. But you also see there something about the reality of the universe, that there are different dimensions, there are different kinds of light by which we can see. And without the light of faith, our vision is very limited. We're not able to make sense of our lives because we're not able to make sense of why other people would be around or why God exists and who God is. This is really important for us. The light of faith helps us in a significant way. It's helped me. It's helped me a lot. And without it, I don't know really where I would be or who I would be. Without the light of faith, famously, St. Thomas Aquinas says that we can have a sense for the existence of God, not the Christian God, not the God of redemption, but the God maybe of the creation of the world, bringing things into existence. But the light of faith, by which we're meant to run, also grants us deeply personal insight that consoles us and encourages us in the midst of suffering and great trial. There was a time, I remember, I was a seminarian at the North American College in Rome, and at the beginning of every academic year, we would be taken away as a class on a retreat. So I was taken out to the Castelli Hills just outside of Rome, to a beautiful retreat center with all of my classmates, and we spent 5 days in a silent retreat. On these retreats, you pray 4 or 5 hours every day. And I was praying, and I had had several periods of prayer that were just very dry. Nothing was happening in them, and I was just sort of getting through them. And that's how a lot of people live their lives, whether they're praying or not. There can be a kind of barrenness to life, a dryness in which you don't know why you're there or why you should go on. And then in the midst of it, as I was praying, a memory came to me, a very recent memory. I was making my way for the first time through J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. I had read The Hobbit years before, like most people, when you're a little kid, you read The Hobbit. But I had never made my way, this was 25 years ago. So I was in my early 20s, and I was making my way through The Lord of the Rings for the first time. This was before the films of Peter Jackson were released, and I'm glad I read them before I watched the films. But I remember being mesmerized by the arrival of the Fellowship of the Ring to Rohan, the kingdom of the horsemen. And they were escorted into Meduseld, which was the golden hall of the king of the Rohirrim, Theoden. I think Tolkien had modeled that off of the mead hall in Beowulf, the Danish, the mead hall of the Danish king in Beowulf. But I was just struck by that scene, the gallantry of coming into the presence of a great king in a great hall like that. And so I was praying. I'd had several dry hours of prayer. And all of a sudden, I was swept up into that memory. And our imaginations, when we exercise them in prayer, God can really work through that in magnificent ways. The saints knew this. They know it beautifully. And as I realized then, in the midst of that reverie, I realized that I was in the presence of a great king in that small chapel on a hillside outside of Rome, that I was, by faith, I was in the presence already of a great king. And a voice came to me, the words came to me, resonating deep in my heart, "The king is my brother. The king is my brother." This was one of those great lifelong graces that I was able then to return to again and again and again. Because as I pondered it, and as I let God fill out the contours of that phrase, "the king is my brother," I realized how much it meant to me. So it wasn't, "My brother is the king." That's a boast, my brother is the king. My dad's bigger than your dad, type of thing. It wasn't that. It was, the king is my brother. So here's this great king, not Theoden, not some earthly king or some king out of epic fiction, but a real king, the young king of the universe, who has taken his throne, who reigns without rival until the end of time and then beyond, for eternity. And what does it mean to be the brother of the king? So I already know that he is the ruler of my life, the one whom I obey, my liege lord, the one whom I would lay my sword down in front of. But if he's also my brother, it means that I ride out with him to battle, that when my blood splashes or his does, we're there for each other. It means that in the planning of how this policy will be implemented, or how this sortie or charge will be enacted, that I'm there in the whispered counsels behind the scenes, that somehow my life, my mind, my body are all caught up in this great adventure for which there's no end, going deeper and deeper into profound mysteries of life and God. The king is my brother, and so I bow my knee before him. But it means also that we have the same Father, who is the emperor beyond the sea. Now that's Lewis, not Tolkien. That the one who brought all things into existence is our Father, and that we're his sons and daughters, and that the king is our brother. This for me has been a great, not insight. In the spiritual life, insights are a dime a dozen. Anybody can come up with those. Something has to grip you more deeply than an insight. Lots of people, live like that. They'll make their spiritual lives all about a series of insights that pile up, but they're not worth a dime a dozen. They're nothing. They don't change your life. They don't transform you. They might motivate you on a superficial level, but they don't cause you to reform. They don't protect you from sin. They don't encourage you to heroism, all of that. But something deeper than an insight, a conviction, a truth, which lands in your heart or in your mind, can give you great hope. And that has given me great hope because it reminds me of my nobility. I remember when I was a little boy, I grew up 2 miles north of a town of 200 people. We were farmers and very poor. And, coming to the big city, to Bismarck, that didn't happen all that often for us. And when it did, I remember driving past the Capitol and looking and thinking that it was the most important place in the world, the Capitol building of North Dakota. And that I could never even go in there. I'd never even be able to go in, they would never have a poor farm kid in there. The truth that was given to me by faith was that my nobility, which doesn't come from me, it's not a result of anything I've earned or my merits, but the fact that God has placed his hand upon me and claimed my life for his own and given me a mission that I'm able to live, that I'm willing to suffer for, that's worth any cost. That has been an animating principle in my life since. The French have a saying, noblesse oblige. I love it, noblesse oblige. It's a saying that pertains for them to the nobility. That if you're of noble blood, it means that you can't act as though you're not. You have to carry yourself a certain way. And I think that does apply to us who are sons and daughters of the great emperor and brothers of the king. That it means that as Christians, we can't slouch through our lives. That we can't just sort of give up and let it all hang out, or camp out in sweatpants all the time. It's not about that. That we're able to stand up straight, that we're able to live with a kind of nobility and move through life with a courtesy and a grace and a quiet, abiding joy which penetrates secrets and opens doors and affirms the very highest dignity of the human person. One time when I was home from college, I remember reading under the bed sheets, hiding under a bed with the bed covers with my flashlight, and reading William Peter Blatty's novelist, The Exorcist, which was made into a film in the early 1970s. And there's a scene in there where this young priest who's having a crisis of faith is talking to this older, seasoned exorcist. And they're out in the hallway. They've been working on this exorcism of this young girl, Regan, who is sort of ruthlessly victimized by the demon who's possessed her. And the young priest says to the older priest, they say that in this possession thing, the demon doesn't touch the will of the one who's possessed. The old priest says, yes, that's right. Of course, the theological implication is clear. That means that there's no sin. In other words, the demon, after possessing the person, isn't able to get him or her to sin directly as a result of having possessed them, because it doesn't touch the will. At least that's what the novel said. And so the young priest then says, and this is a perfectly good question, well, then what's the point? What's the point? Is it just a display? Is it just pyrotechnics? Is it just fireworks? And the older priest said, no, I think the real victims are not the possessed, but all of us who are here, who seeing this horrific display of a human being crumpled and paralyzed and sick and spasmodic, that the real victim is all of us, that in the midst of this, as we witness it, we doubt our humanity. We begin to see ourselves as something puerile and worthless and disposable, something worse than ugly, something horrific, a horror, that somehow we begin to believe that our own dignity, which comes from God, it comes because we were made in the image and likeness of God, that our own dignity is nothing, that it's not true. The King is my brother, for me, means that actually know my dignity and the dignity of every human being whom I interact with and serve is very great. So great that if I could see it, I might fall down flat on my face before them. C.S. Lewis calls this the weight of our neighbor's glory. That each of us bears the weight of glory of the immortal souls that we interact with day by day. Faith reveals that truth to us. How high is our dignity? How great is our nobility? How precious the blood that runs through our veins, and then as a result, how extraordinarily important it is that we don't squander the gift of our lives. Run while you have the light of life before the darkness of death overtakes you, because if we don't seize the chance and the possibility and the gift of our lives every day, and we can fail to do that. We can waste our lives. We can squander our lives, but that's a choice. But if we don't, if we really rise to the occasion and allow the grace of God, which brought us into existence for a purpose, not an accident, but so that we might achieve some great, magnificent mission, which God hasn't given to anybody else, if we rise to that, then our glory is very great because it's beyond our own capacity. It's a light that is given to us like the light of the angel in Raphael's painting, in his fresco, in the rooms of the Apostolic Palace. It's a light which is given to us from heaven, and it's a light that we're meant to live in for all of eternity. This is a promise which is given us. Of course, I was making reference just there to that famous text from St. John Henry Newman, where he talks about the purpose that each of us have in our lives, that each of us has a place as important in our place as an archangel in his. I always ask our students this: do you believe that? Do you believe that in God's great plan, that he brought you into existence with such clarity and with such a sense of purpose and meaning that your mission that he's given to you and to no one else is as important to him as the work that he's given to an archangel? That's true. It's a truth of faith. And with the light of faith, we can believe it, and then we have to live by it. But it's not a hard or heavy burden for us to live in that way. It's the way we were meant to live. We, of all the creatures of the earth, walk upright on hind legs and look at the stars. We gaze to the stars. We look up. Because we were made for something beyond this world, beyond this earth. And the light of faith shows us that. Even here below, in the midst of our lives, we're meant to carry ourselves with a certain austerity and dignity and glory, which is worthy of being the sons and daughters of God the Father and brothers of the King. Brothers of the King. And so, run while you have the light of life, then, is a clarion call, not just for university students at the University of Mary, but for all of us to allow God, because he wants to fill us with the energy and joy that we need to overcome every obstacle, to fight through every suffering and setback, and to rally to his heart in the midst of every need, so that we can live lives that are worthy of the great nobility and dignity that we've been given in our mission by the young King of the whole universe. That's our work as we run while we have the light of life. Thanks for watching and for your support of the Stand Firm project. We hope you continue to watch for more great content.